The Chicago Bears botched the Justin Fields situation, both on the field and off of it with the trade of him to the Pittsburgh Steelers. We talk about why and so much more coming up next on this episode of Locked On NFL.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. We are your daily NFL podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher. I'm the host of Locked On Ravens, also one of the many NFL experts here on our network. We're free and available on all podcasting platforms here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making Locked On NFL your first listen each and every day. We are free and available, again, all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube. You can like the video, subscribe to the channel, also in audio form as well, where you can follow along on your favorite podcast provider. Today's episode of Locked On NFL is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Week 1 of free agency officially in the books after today, as the legal tampering period was 1 week ago, last Monday. So we're about a week into free agency and quite a lot has happened. We're going to be talking a lot today, but mostly about the Steelers and the Bears and that Russell Wilson trade and what's going on. We'll also get into some Ravens stuff. There's some drama going on in Baltimore. And who doesn't love a little drama, right? So I'll talk about what's going on in Baltimore myself in the final part of the episode. But I do want to dive into the Justin Fields situation. Obviously, that pairs up with Russell Wilson and what happened with him. But a lot of people across the league kind of feel like the Bears botched this whole Justin Fields situation. We're going to dive a bit deeper into that today, talking in the first segment with Lorin Cox of Locked On Bears. We're going to have a lot to talk about with Lorin just in terms of the Bears' value they got for Justin Fields and how they ended up utilizing him on the field and even the weapons they gave him and that decision-making process off of it. Then in the second part of the show, we'll get the Steelers' perspective from Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers, who was very busy last week with the Russell Wilson news. And now Justin Fields, a complete revamp of the quarterback room. We'll talk about what it means for them and a lot more as well. So let's first get into our conversation with Lorin Cox of Locked On Bears. The Chicago Bears officially move on from Justin Fields, sending him to the Pittsburgh Steelers, but for not a lot of value, all things considered. Here to talk about that with me, Caleb Williams, the number 1 pick, and what the Bears have done this offseason is Lorin Cox, the host of Locked On Bears. And Lorin, I think this was an inevitability for a lot of people with the Bears having the number 1 pick and Justin Fields showing some flashes, but not being where the Bears needed him to be at this point in his career. Now, they end up moving into Pittsburgh, but a lot of people, there are conversations about, could it be a first rounder? Could it be a second rounder? But the Bears get a 6th round pick that can move to a 4th, and it's not even a pick for this year. It's 2025. How shocked were you at how little the Bears got for a player that's still extremely talented and has a ton of potential in Justin Fields?
Yeah, I think the shock came down a little bit the longer it took for a trade to happen. I think we kind of had this feeling like, okay, before free agency was maybe when his value felt the highest because there were all these teams that needed quarterbacks. And so that's when but then like as the quarterback dominoes fell, you could feel Justin Fields' trade value falling. So like then it becomes a little bit less shocking, but they still got even less than I had lowered my expectations for. Like once we kind of moved from the conversation of trading him to a team where he could be a starter to now trading him to a team where he could be a backup. Okay, you move from like the 2nd round pick, day 2 pick type conversation to like early day 3, Trey Lance goes for a 4th round pick, and we saw Desmond Ridder go for, I guess he was directly for like a number 3 receiver, and all the other quarterback trades were some pick swaps in there that were worth around like an early day 3 pick. So like that's kind of what I was expecting. Like surely he couldn't go for as little as Mac Jones went to the Jaguars for a 6th round pick, and yet more or less, I mean, with conditions, that's kind of where we ended up. Like I was expecting after we got this late through the trade process that it would be a 2025 conditional draft pick based on playing time. I just thought it would be like, okay, it starts out as a 4th, and then if he plays really well, it becomes a 2nd or a 3rd, but it ended up being much, much lower than that, which is disappointing. But the Bears also really wanted to do right by Justin Fields. That was the phrase. And there's been some reporting from ESPN and others that maybe the Bears took a slightly lesser offer to send him to Pittsburgh, where they think, maybe it's a better organization for him. I mean, I don't think they turned down a great deal from anybody, but I think maybe they could have got a fifth instead of a sixth or something from some other team. But they said, no, we do want to send him to Pittsburgh and leave him in a good spot, conveniently in the AFC that they don't have to play very often.
Right. Getting him out of the conference, I think, might have also, we don't know who the team was, but maybe that was a motivating factor in that as well. But now we know Lorin, the Bears with that number 1 pick. Everybody expects it to be Caleb Williams at number 1. They go all in on that selection. This was an inevitability, but now that Fields is no longer there, it has to be Caleb Williams, right?
Yeah, that's where everything has been pointing to this offseason, even before the trade. Like going to the Senior Bowl, going to the Combine, hearing what people are saying. Like, to me, up throughout this point, it felt like either the Bears were pulling off the biggest smokescreen in NFL history, or they were going to trade Justin Fields and draft Caleb Williams. So, like, it turned out pretty good that, yes, that was all legitimate, that they're in love with Caleb. They're really just trying to, like, cross their T's and dot their I's and just make sure that, when you're using the number 1 overall pick, you don't want to just say, oh, yeah, we like him, we're just rolling with it. Like, they have their choice of any of the quarterbacks. So they want to just double and triple check for sure that one of these other guys doesn't, wow them, or something doesn't come out in this process negatively about one of the others. But I think at this point, it would take some kind of crazy legal issue or criminal something or other to pop up out of nowhere for Caleb to keep the Bears from actually drafting him at this point. Like, it would take something extreme and abnormal, but otherwise it's full steam ahead.
And where are you on Caleb Williams as a prospect and how he fits Chicago? You're all in on the idea too, or are there some things that worry you about him?
I think it's both, right? I am all in on the idea, and there are things that worry about him. Like, when you have the number 1 overall pick, like, he is the best quarterback in this draft and the one I would absolutely take. I don't think he's a flawless prospect by any means, and I think there's bust potential. Just like I think pretty much any quarterback in any draft, as much as we say, Andrew Luck was flawless or whatever, or however you want to describe these quarterbacks, like, they all do have flaws. You're never 100% sure. But I think with Caleb, the playmaking and the ceiling there, like, when you really do see, it's an unfair comparison, but flashes of Patrick Mahomes, like, you can really see that you can't expect him to be that in the NFL, but when you see that kind of special level of passing playmaking, not just the special level of running playmaking that Justin Fields did, like, that's worth the swing and the risk and the move to that type of quarterback. Like, I don't know what percentage odds, I'd put on it, but if you're like 70% sure Caleb Williams is going to be great, or 80% sure, like, that's good enough for me if he can be that kind of difference making quarterback. And as far as number 1 overall picks go, he might be coming into the best year 1 situation of any number 1 pick in the last 20 years. Cause usually it's the worst team in the NFL, not the team that finished in the bottom 10, but was not anywhere as bad as where the Carolina Panthers were, that would have got them the number 1 overall pick.
Yeah, and I think part of that, too, is what Chicago has done this offseason in terms of adding pieces around what is expected to be Williams. There you add DeAndre Swift to your running back room. You trade for Keenan Allen, who was so dominant last year in Los Angeles and hasn't over the course of his career, and that was only for a 4th-round pick. What have you liked and disliked about what Chicago has done this offseason to try to build their roster out?
Yeah, big fan of the Keenan Allen trade. I mean, that was an easy one to be a big fan of. You can get a 1,200-yard veteran receiver for a 4th-round pick. Yeah, I think a lot of teams would sign themselves up for that. He is on a 1-year deal, or is on the last year of his current deal, but so you're not guaranteed anything beyond this year, but they've expressed some optimism towards, making that a longer partnership than just a 1-year rental there. I wish they would have done, and it's obviously we're still not toward the end of free agency yet, but I'd still like to see them do more on the offensive line. Ideally, they brought in a couple of centers, but it has kind of felt like a little bit on the, not the cheaper end, but kind of more like we're gonna have a competition there between guys. And I would have liked to say, like, all right, Caleb Williams, you're in Chicago. Here's a veteran, solid, no questions asked center that is just going to lock down the middle of your offensive line. You can build that relationship for the next 5 years. Like, it's kind of like guys on 1-year deal that they're going to try out with some experience, but I would have just liked a little bit more certainty there and kind of just across the offensive line. Like, can we really prioritize that? But obviously getting great weapons is really important for the quarterback too. So you can't do everything all at once. And I think they've made enough progress to have a good spot for him, but you always want a little more.
Yeah. And since we started with Justin Fields, Lorin, I'll end with him as well. What are you going to remember about the Justin Fields era in Chicago, whether it be the highs or the lows of what it ended up bringing to the fan base and to the organization?
Yeah, I think what we'll remember about the Justin Fields experience was feeling like he never really got a fair shake, at least from the start. He never got off to the start that you really wanted to set up a rookie quarterback with, that you kind of wondered, like, what if he had come into an organization that didn't have a lame duck head coach at the time in Matt Nagy in his last year, that didn't really handle his rookie season well. And then year 2, course, they tried to tear everything down. So he had terrible receiving core, terrible offensive line. Like he was just in a bad offense for like 2 straight years, his first 2 years of his career. And you kind of wonder, man, if he could have come into a situation like Caleb Williams is coming into now, what kind of quarterback could he have been for the Bears there? And I think it's kind of a contrast to the last Bears quarterback before, Mitch Trubisky, where it felt like the Bears did a lot to give Trubisky, maybe not in his year one, but like his second year in 2018 when they had a good season, like he was in a good spot and was able to produce some in that season and then couldn't really keep that up. And it was like, okay, we gave Trubisky every chance to succeed and he couldn't. But with Justin, it felt like they only gave him a couple of chances to succeed and he couldn't. But you always wonder, like, if they had done it a little differently, could he have been something better? And maybe he still can with the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, and so a follow-up to that, was that offensive line? Was it weapons? Was it everything combined into one for why you didn't think he got a fair shake?
Yeah, it was definitely everything. But like, so like year one, he works as a backup throughout the entire training camp, preseason, offseason, never gets to work with the starters because the plan is to sit him all year. And then 3 weeks in, he's thrown in the starting lineup, having never worked with these receivers. And it's like, okay, now you just got to figure it on the fly. And then year two, you had no receivers, no offensive line. The scheme wasn't really helping him until about halfway through the year. They switched it to be more of like a rushing attack with him and they unlocked some stuff, but then they got away from it in year three. And it just never, the pieces were never there to really feel like, oh man, they've put Justin Fields in a great spot. Like if he's an elite quarterback, should he have overcome some of those things more? Probably. But you never know if you really give him that right beginning, if he could develop into something even better than he started as. So that's where it's like, you wonder what if, but it's time to move on to Caleb.
We'll see how the Bears handle the Caleb Williams situation. Hopefully it's a lot better than Justin Fields. For more on Lorin's work, check him out over the Locked On Bears podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up with the second part of the show, we'll be talking with Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers, continuing our conversation about Justin Fields, just from the other side. Stay tuned. A lot to get to on Locked On NFL. First, this show is brought to you by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood is the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost in every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood's even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on a 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most of your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at Robinhood.com/boost. The prescription fees apply now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC member SIPC is a registered broker-dealer. We're back our second segment of Locked On NFL. Kevin Oestreicher still talking with you on this Monday, and really appreciate everybody for being here with us on Locked On NFL today. We talked about the Justin Fields situation from the Bears' perspective. Now let's go to the other side with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers, very excited about the move. He'll tell us why coming up now. The Pittsburgh Steelers make a move and acquire Justin Fields from the Chicago Bears. And it wasn't the haul that Chicago was expecting to get. Pittsburgh gives up a 6th-round pick that can go to a 4th-rounder in 2025. Here to talk about that with me, the Kenny Pickett situation, and a lot more is Chris Carter, the host of Locked On Steelers. And Chris, busy Sunday for the Steelers last week. They signed Russell Wilson late at night, and we obviously talked about that late for last week's edition of Locked On NFL on Monday. But now the Steelers get another quarterback. Justin Fields comes in, and now there's a dynamic between Wilson and Fields that a lot of people are unsure what to make of. How did you like the move for Pittsburgh actually going out there and getting a talent like Justin Fields, who, again, the potential's there for him, and I think it's sky high?
Here's the thing is that there's low risk and there's no risk. That's what the Steelers did with these moves. Like, Russell Wilson's a $1.2 million salary cap hit. Like, if he don't work out, oh, well, you spent $1 million on him. Like that's not going to hurt you. Justin Fields, like right now, and we'll answer this. Wilson is projected to be the QB1. Like, he's like, Tomlin's already made that clear, and Justin Fields is totally fine with it. According to what we're hearing, everything's going to be, that's going to be sorted out. So basically, because that's going to happen, unless Russell Wilson gets hurt or Justin Fields replaces him and plays most of the snaps this year, that's going to be a 6th-round 2025 pick that they got Justin Fields for. Like, for all the things that happened with Kenny Pickett, and we'll get into that in a minute, you just replenished yourself with a first-round draft pick quarterback who, hasn't performed up to the level that the team that drafted him hoped, but has a lot of talent that people still wonder, can he work in a different system? And then you got a 9-time Pro Bowl quarterback who's won a Super Bowl and has been a team leader and has plenty of NFL experience. And you still have space and money and maybe even the capability to draft someone to be behind all three of them. So, to me, this was a no risk situation. The interesting thing is just how quick of a flip the Steelers have gone with their offense. You're talking about a new offensive coordinator and an entirely new quarterback room. We all knew Mitch Trubisky wasn't going to stick around. We thought maybe Mason Rudolph would sign back with the Steelers. He goes to the Titans, but now trading away Kenny Pickett, such a huge turn. It's the earliest a first round draft pick has been sent away from the Steelers since Jermaine Stevens in the 90s. So big, that is a seismic change and difference in how the Steelers front office is operating.
Yeah, and before we get into the Kenny Pickett stuff, because that's a whole nother conversation,
Yeah.
I feel like with this Wilson versus Fields situation, a lot of people are saying, well, what's the long-term plan for Fields and for Wilson? You have two quarterbacks that you could argue could definitely be starters. In fact, different situation. Justin Fields is probably starting for a team next season, but you have Russell Wilson, the veteran, Justin Fields, the young guy. How do you anticipate that quarterback, competition playing out this offseason, and what will it mean for the long-term prospects of both with Pittsburgh?
I think right now the Steelers are more than content to let the veteran be the veteran and let Russell Wilson come in, lead, and let Justin Fields learn behind him. But the Steelers are in a unique position here where they don't have to commit to either one of these guys right now. They can see how these guys play out. If Russell Wilson shows up in your offense and is lighting it up, that changes a whole bunch of different conversations. Like, okay, well, here's this 35, 36-year-old guy who is now working in this new offense and is breathing life into it and setting it up. That right there, if that's your ideal situation, then you come to the crossroads, later in the season where you're like, do you sign him to an extension right away? Do you keep him on the team, or do you go to Justin Fields? Do you try to trade whatever you try to do with Russell Wilson? If he's a fit there, how do you pay him? Because right now you're only paying him $1.2 million. He will not take that probably next year. He'll probably want more money because the Broncos contract will be out. So that's tough. But also, I think, but again, you get a second chance here with Justin Fields. Let's say Russell Wilson is like just okay and doesn't light it up, and then you get the option. Okay, Russ, thank you for your services. Justin, I've been bringing up all along. The 5th-year extension was something that pushed me away from them trading for Fields in the first place. If it wasn't a day 3 pick, let alone a 6th round 2025 pick, that is a totally fine price. But before I was like, for a third or, fourth, even a fourth, it was kind of like, but that 5th-year extension is annoying. But now you're in a position where the 5th-year extension doesn't hurt you as much because you might, like Justin Fields' 5th-year extension would have been active when Kenny Pickett's needed to have been chosen. So like that would have been just a real weird situation, a tough situation to navigate through. Whereas now, if you want to do that, you can, but you can also just go the Jordan Love route and be like, look, you got to prove it, man. We don't know nothing about it. So here's a prove it deal. Go prove it. And if you do, you are the franchise quarterback and you get the keys. If not, you got your shot. And I think that's what Justin Fields is looking for, is just a shot in an organization that will give him a chance and will put a better situation around him than what the Bears did for the last 3 years.
Yeah, and the other part of this whole quarterback carousel for Pittsburgh, we mentioned it, Kenny Pickett gets traded from Pittsburgh to Philadelphia. The Pickett era is over. And there have been some rumblings, Chris, about, just why it ended and how it ended in terms of Kenny Pickett and them bringing in Russell Wilson. What's the whole situation based off of your knowledge of why it didn't work out with Kenny Pickett and why he couldn't be in, the same quarterback room as Russell Wilson for next season?
Well, it seems very much from all the things that I've heard, that my colleagues have heard, that I've spoken with who also cover the Steelers, that Kenny Pickett just did not vibe with Russell Wilson at all. And didn't welcome him into the organization with open arms, and there was some tension there, and there was questions about leadership and who's going. And so the Steelers were like, you know what, like you have not earned the spot without question. Like the Steelers, I think the Steelers were willing to give Kenny Pickett a chance to show what he had in camp. They probably end up picking Russell Wilson and then say, hey Kenny, you can come back your 4th year, and then most likely Russell Wilson's moving on, and then we'll see if you're ready then. But Kenny Pickett didn't seem too interested in that, according to what we're hearing, is that he didn't feel like that was the right situation. So the Steelers were like, you know what, we're not worrying about this because we gave you 2 years to get better. You didn't. And yes, Matt Canada was the offensive coordinator. There were a lot of bad things about that, and that's unfortunate. But they needed him to. But like I think the big thing, and this is the thing that I said about Kenny Pickett even before he was drafted, because I covered him when he was at Pitt. When I look at that situation, I see like, man, Kenny Pickett's best thing was that he was a great teammate, that he was a great leader at Pitt. And that was what they really liked about him, was that he welcomed competition. He welcomed, combat, and just like, being able to be a guy that could handle tense situations. And it appears that he didn't handle this well. And that's when the Steelers are like, look, if you can't handle just a veteran quarterback coming into your room, you're not going to be able to handle, winning playoff games, which is what the Steelers want to get back to doing.
Right. And I know there was a lot of conversation, Chris, about just the Steelers quarterbacks last season and how they didn't perform up to expectations some of the time. And we were talking about it, how, well, they just need somebody to come in and not make mistakes, essentially be a game manager in some ways, shapes, or forms. And whatever else you get, that's a bonus based off how good this defense is and what they've proven. So how much better, when you talk about last year's quarterback room to this year's quarterback room, and even some of the other moves they've made this offseason, has Pittsburgh gotten this offseason?
I mean, you look at what the Steelers are trying to do. One thing, and I said this, people were talking about Matt Canada's play calls. It wasn't the play calls that I said were the problem. It was the organization of the offense itself. And you look at how just discombobulated the Steelers looked for, when he was there, versus the last 3 games when, like, Mason Rudolph came in and they had a plan and they used it and they attacked it and they were able to win games by scoring 30 points or more sometimes. So I think what you're going to see here is that the Steelers are going to have guys who there aren't expectations. When Kenny Pickett was drafted, I think there were expectations for him to be given keys, to be allowed to do so much and have a say in things. And they tried to make him into a leader. They put his locker right next to Cam Hayward's. They were trying to do everything. They were calling him Big Ken at the start of the season because they were trying to pump up his confidence. And he had a really good preseason, and then he didn't have a good season. And it seems like he didn't take that well, and the offense wasn't feeling that. So now you have 2 guys who are coming in who are respected for being, either a Super Bowl champion or a veteran guy, or an athlete that has a lot of upside to him if he's able to put it together. And neither of them have that expectation to be the guy. Neither coming in entitled and feeling like, hey, I'm your first round draft pick. I deserve X, Y, and Z. That's where I think the Steelers look at and they say, hey, we can work with either one of these guys. And if neither of them work, all right, back to the drawing board. But I think raw talent wise, you look at Russell Wilson's experience, that's gonna get you more better situations than what you had with Kenny Pickett in decision making. I think Justin Fields has a much higher upside with a stronger arm and more athleticism than Kenny Pickett as far as his ability to run the ball. So you take those and you say, all right, we wash our hands of the situation. Crazy enough, Kenny Pickett drew better compensation than Justin Fields in the trade market, which didn't see that coming. But I think that's the thing. The Steelers, with this new front office, with Omar Khan and Andy Weidel, they're not afraid to take big swings, and they're taking big swings left and right. And as you see, across the board, they've traded away Deontay Johnson. They went and signed Patrick Queen. And I don't think that they're done. I think that they have some more aggressive plays in them to fill out this roster.
Chris is awesome, and this move for Fields, in my opinion, even though I do cover the Ravens, right? I do cover the Baltimore Ravens. I think it was a great move for Pittsburgh, and I think the Wilson move was a great one. The AFC North is going to be shaping up for another big year. For more on Chris, check him out over at the Locked On Steelers podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network here, your team every day. Coming up, I'll be taking you home, talking about Derrick Henry to the Ravens, but also some major drama brewing in Baltimore between former players and the fan base. A lot to get to still on Locked On NFL. First, this show is brought to you by Gametime. There have been a lot of frustrating ticket buying experiences in my life. Sometimes I wasn't sure if the seats were good. Other times I couldn't find last-minute tickets, and sometimes there were just no good deals at all. Now, you shouldn't have to worry about all that when you buy tickets, because Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With good last-minute deals on big events, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the best price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. The Gametime app, opening day is screaming up on us here in Baltimore. Opening day for the Orioles is going to be really, really exciting. But obviously also there are concerts as well. Plenty of events over on Gametime. There are last-minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals over on the Gametime app, plus views from all the seats in the venue. Plus Gametime is a ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on your tickets too. With zone deals, you can get the section in Gametime picks seats for big-time savings. Take the girls work out of buying tickets with the Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account, redeem code LOCKEDON, spelled LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Ask me to take its lowest price guaranteed. We're back, our final segment of Locked On NFL. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you, diving into plenty of NFL talk. Free agency has been a wild one so far. We talked about Justin Fields, talked about Russell Wilson. Now let's talk about another team in the AFC North, talk about the Steelers in that second segment. I'll take you home with the Ravens in the final part of the show. Now I'll start with Derrick Henry, and then I'll move in to the big drama that we have in Baltimore right now. So Derrick Henry, the Ravens, it was a 2-year, $16 million deal with $8 million guaranteed. Now, it felt like this was kind of in the works for a while. The rumors and the rumblings around the trade deadline last year was that the Ravens and the Titans actually had agreed to a deal sending Henry to the Ravens for a mid to late round pick. But the owner of the Titans actually shot down the deal and said, no, we're not doing this. Likely, even though, they probably knew Derrick Henry was on the way out, it was more so of a let's just keep him here. His legacy in Tennessee instead of trading him midseason is more important than that pick. So those were the rumblings. And then Eric DeCosta at Henry's introductory press conference actually didn't say quite that, but he admitted that there was a thing that he thought was going to get done with Derrick Henry. Didn't get done, was disappointing. They had targeted him. So there was a lot of smoke around this for a really long time. Now, Henry and Lamar Jackson in the same backfield is I just feel like it's such a nightmare for opposing defenses, right? You have the yin and yang, as I've been calling it on Locked On Ravens, where both guys can beat you in very different ways, especially when they're one-on-one battles. And that's what I think is the most intriguing part to me. It's that part of it. Because with Lamar in that Ravens offense, sure, Gus Edwards was really good, right? J.K. Dobbins really good. But Derrick Henry is just on another level. I know people can say, oh, well, he's 30 years old, and that means he's washed. He's a running back. Derrick Henry is not washed. Is he prime 2019 Offensive Player of the Year, Derrick Henry? No, I think he's lost a step since then, right? I think we can all admit that. But I still think that he's a top 5 running back in this league. And you pair him up with a guy who is just as dynamic with his legs as he is with his arm, and Lamar Jackson. I think that, to me, is just a perfect pairing, because Derrick Henry can run you over. Lamar Jackson can juke you out of your shoes, right? This whole thing is how these two pair up with each other and how much stress it's going to put on opposing defenses. So that, to me, is the yin and the yang of this whole thing. They did lose a lot of guys in free agency. Derrick Henry has been their only outside addition at the time of this recording. They've lost Patrick Queen. They've lost Geno Stone. They've lost Ronald Darby. It seems like Odell Beckham Jr. just posted a farewell to the team on Instagram yesterday. So he's out the door, it looks like, as well. So they are losing guys left and right. Tyler Huntley, he signed with the Browns yesterday. So they've lost, I think, upwards. It probably is about 10 free agents right now. So that's a lot of guys from, again, the number 1 seed in the AFC. They have already lost a huge amount of coaches. They've lost a ton of coaches. So it's going to be a different team. And that's with everyone, right? Every team is going to be different. Not every season is the same. Every season is a different team, different coaching staff. Just depends how much change there actually is. There's going to be a lot of change in Baltimore. Now, the drama, that's what everybody's waiting for, right? The drama, the juicy drama, comes with Patrick Queen, who now is with the enemy in Baltimore and the Pittsburgh Steelers. That rivalry obviously has been a thing for a very long time. And so Patrick Queen, first of all, the decision for him to sign there obviously rubbed a lot of fans the wrong way. Then in his introductory press conference, he ended up saying, yeah, I want to be the villain. I want to be that guy. I have something for them, meaning the Ravens. And then, all the fans started to rip him for that and start to roast him for that. So then he took to Twitter on Saturday and said, hey, just can everybody stop now? Go touch some grass. Just went on this kind of rant on Twitter about how he said what he said. He's going to stick by it, this, that, and the other. So a lot of back and forth between Patrick Queen and the fans. But now the whole conversation is, well, what villain all of a sudden takes to Twitter and says, stop insulting me, stop doing this, stop doing that. I think for Patrick Queen, really good player. He's young. He still has a lot of room to grow, really young, but was a second-team All-Pro last season. But again, it's this thing about going to enemy lines. The Ravens actually have had a player go to each division rival, Queen to the Steelers, Geno Stone to the Bengals, and also Tyler Huntley to the Browns. So people crossing enemy lines over in Baltimore, again, rubbing fans the wrong way a little bit. With Baltimore, they were good enough, and they have plenty of core pieces still there. They signed just Matabike to the extension. Obviously, if you have Lamar, you have a chance. I think that's the saying I keep going with. But Patrick Queen might have just reignited this Ravens-Steelers rivalry. Not that it ever went away, but it's become much more of a thing of respect. And it seems like the Ravens-Bengals rivalry has been more that like bad blood thing. But I don't know. It feels like this is definitely reinvigorated, at least within the fan base. So we're going to see what happens with that. That's all I have here today, though, on Locked On NFL. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Coming up some more NFL content with your Tuesday host. So be sure to stay tuned. We'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On NFL.